Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third of Being's weekly webinar series during Mental Health Month, where we're exploring the theme of reclaiming our rights through peer work. I'm Omer, and I'm your MC for this incredible series that Being has created for you. Today, I'm coming to you from the land of the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional owners of this land. So I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I acknowledge all people with lived experience of mental health issues, and I recognize their insights, their strengths, and their contributions to influencing change in the mental health system. I also acknowledge all people from diverse cultural backgrounds, including the LGBTQIA+ communities. You know, in preparing for this webinar, I was reflecting on these important acknowledgements, and I began thinking about those people with lived experience who may also identify with an Indigenous heritage and a diverse cultural background. And, you know, I felt really sad about how hard it must be to try and reclaim rights from one of these fronts, let alone all three. And, you know, in truth, my sadness started to expand into other emotions like anger and injustice until I remembered the power of peer work, you know, and what a gift peer work is to uphold rights and transform lives. And I think for those who don't properly understand peer work, they can sometimes undervalue it. But those who have been touched by it know how fundamental it is to helping consumers live purposeful, fulfilled lives with an opportunity to contribute to society. To get me out of my funk as well, I also remember that our focus on these webinars is always on the positive, right? Our aim is to strengthen the hope and the expectation that we can influence systemic change. And I remembered that you can't get a negative input. So we want to channel our emotions like sadness, anger, injustice, and put them to work for the positive. But if you are triggered by any of today's content, please reach out for support, either through a peer support service or a telephone service like Lifeline. So today, we will be exploring the role of peer workers in advocating for consumer survivor rights. How can peer workers help support individuals' human rights when it comes to mental health? You know, our panel of insightful and experienced peer workers will discuss how their work really does uphold human rights. They'll share their involvement in this space and hopefully inspire current and future peer workers in how to best work in mental health from a rights-based perspective. Now, at the start of Mental Health Month, remember we were all in lockdown, which is why we went online with this series. And whilst in the future we'll be really looking forward to connecting with you face-to-face, we are today in webinar mode. And we would love your questions. So pop them into the live chat on the right of your screen. Any questions you want on the topic of peer work and how it relates to rights, we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. And we'll move forward there. So should we get started? We have a brilliant panel lined up for you to discuss reclaiming our human rights through peer work. So let me introduce our three panelists. Andrew Padayachy is a forensic senior peer worker. Andrew is a proud Sydney-sider who has found life, at the best of times, tough. He knows the custodial and forensic setting as a prisoner, patient, and employee. He's also discovering his life potential through resilience and inspiration. And Andrew says that no scar, physical or emotional, has set him back from being the best he can. Without the path Andrew has walked, he would not be able to share his story so passionately. And Andrew is so passionate, he's dialing in from his car today. So let's see how the technology holds up. It has been a bit on and off. So thank you, Andrew, for bearing with us, and we'll see how we go. But welcome, Andrew, with some virtual and mobile applause. Andrew, welcome. Do you want to say a quick hello? Make sure that the technology is working.
Thank you, everyone. I do apologize if I'm coming through unclear. I am in my car.
All good, all good. Not your fault, Andrew. Technology is what it is. We're all used to it. All right, so enjoy. Linda Lee is a mental health peer worker. Linda's peer work over 16 years has taught her so much about herself. She's learned to see the early warning signs, learned strategies and mental health education, and she's met some really wonderful people. Having mental health issues has taught Linda that she has an extra sense, empathy. And you know, that can't be taught from a textbook. And Linda is as passionate today as she was 16 years ago. So welcome, Linda. All right, keep the applause going. Do you want to say a quick hello? Okay, good. And we have Benjamin Brien,
Hi.
mental health peer worker. Ben's 27 years old. He's from Dubbo. And Ben's experienced mental health and drug and alcohol issues and an ongoing recovery journey since the age of 15. He was recently appointed as team leader suicide prevention for Alternative to ED. Ben identifies as male, his pronouns are he, his, and he's passionate about recovery, co-design, and the development of the lived experience workforce. So welcome, Ben. You want to say a quick hello, Ben?
Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, I just want to say thank you to all three of you. I am so looking forward to chatting with you today. And thank you so much for all of your time. So let's start with a question for all of the panelists, and we'll start with you, Andrew, and then Linda and Ben will come to you both as well. So Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in the consumer advocacy movement and your work as a peer worker?
Okay, thanks, Omer. Yep. My involvement in the consumer movement, the advocacy movement, I define as having lived experience of systemic oppression and marginalization of socially and culturally, and marginalization socially, culturally, and legally. Therefore, now being a proactive advocate by walking alongside consumers on their journey as a senior forensic peer worker, I can help navigate and understand systems and processes by identifying areas of concern for consumers within those systemic boundaries.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for working through the car things. You're doing a great job. Just want to come back to you very quickly, just because you mentioned two words, inspiration and resilience. Are they the two things that have really led you through in your work as a peer worker?
Inspiration, yes, because I can provide and also be inspired. And if I'm inspired, I hope to inspire others as well. So resilience also, as a big part of life, everyone experiences some sort of trauma at some stage in many different forms, and how you look at that and can move in the direction that you're benefiting yourself and others is what resilience is about.
That's great, Andrew. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for sharing that one. And actually, I remember you from the Consumer Peer Workers Forum. I think you led the meditation. So every time I see your name, I just go into this calm meditative state. So thank you for that as well. Linda, can we bring you in now? Huh? From your perspective, we'd love to learn a bit more. Tell us a bit about your involvement in the consumer survivor advocacy movement and your work as a peer worker.
I started out just by trying to help someone, not even trying to help myself, but to help a neighbour. And yeah, it just grew from there. You find people that are either put in the too hard basket, or, you know, they don't want to know about them because they're a problem client. And then that's what made me get into it.
Tell us a bit more about that. I mean, it's lovely, you know, you just wanted that to help, and you're so passionate about that. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experiences? We'd love to learn a bit more about you, Linda.
I was diagnosed at a young age. So I was diagnosed at 19. So I came from a family whose mum had mental health issues. So I don't know any different, and didn't know any different. So I found it easy to wear the diagnosis. And it just put me on a different path. So yeah, from the age of probably 40 is when I got really involved in it, and I have loved working in mental health and working with like-minded people.
Yeah, that's where the empathy comes from, doesn't it, Linda? I think you know, that really shines through with you. So yeah, so thank you for sharing.
It's like we have a radar.
Okay.
And you can tell whether people are being real or whether they're just, you know, like full of garbage.
Yeah, very true. And I think that it's that realness, that radar that we're really looking forward to chatting about today, because this is a very real topic, and we're really looking forward to sort of digging into some conversations and kind of learning more about the insights that you've had and sharing them with with others that are trying to follow in your footsteps. Yeah. So yeah, really looking forward to that. Ben, my friend, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement and your work, and and if you'd be kind enough to also share a little bit about your background and story as well.
Yeah, I suppose I can chunk it out into two parts, like a bit about me and a bit about my involvement in it. So particularly, very similar to what Linda was saying previously, I was diagnosed with mental health issues, conditions, and so forth at a really young age of 15, now 27. So it's over 10 years that's happened. I've always had an ongoing recovery journey, really always been the advocate out of my friend group and family, regardless of how acutely unwell or disturbed or confused or whatever term it is that I was at the time. I was always the one to speak. But recently, for the last 3 years, I've been employed as a mental health peer worker. So I work between a community mental health team, a subacute unit, mental health inpatient unit, and a bit in the community as well. So I think for that, things sort of changed for me personally and professionally in one of my times where I sort of reached a reasonable point in my recovery journey, and in terms of the human rights and survivor advocacy movement, I started volunteering at a Headspace YRG youth reference group just to help sort of sponsor and role model for some of the younger guys. And recently, like you said earlier, I've now got a job as suicide prevention. So that's my progression in the movement, I think. And also similar to what Andrew said, I've experienced, that marginalisation and a lot of that trauma that you get in and out of the system.
Yeah, you've all experienced that marginalisation, and I think it's that lived experience that makes it such an important job that you do. Andrew, let's come back to you. I know that I can see the car tech coming in and out. So again, a question for all of you, but let's start with Andrew, and let's get down to the crux of this one. Where do you see human rights fitting into the peer worker space, Andrew?
Um, I see human rights fitting into the peer workspace, um, starting from knowing the importance of human rights in peer work, um, uh, providing consumers some form of convergence by advocating and bringing alternative perspectives to challenge systemic ideations. So consumers are protected and respected, and dignity is upheld. And that is most important often at a person's most traumatic or difficult time, and in some cases, particularly where I work, when they're involuntarily held.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is that catch-22, isn't it? Our human rights are probably most important at the very time that they're potentially being taken away. You touched on a couple of other things. Could you talk a little bit more about kind of a convergence? I mean, dignity obviously is a concept that's so paramount. But yeah, talk a bit more about convergence, if you might, Andrew. And what did you mean by that? And how
So
can how
sure,
can we move that forward?
sure. So definitely understanding through empathy someone's traumatic experience, and being able to understand that they may not have the words to relay are involuntarily housed or going through a traumatic experience, and having that ability to be the person of convergence to relay information to a team and vice versa, can be a crucial part to someone's rehabilitation and recovery.
So really, so the convergence is having that empathy and relaying the information to help move that forward and help those rights get heard and reclaimed. Yeah. Hmm?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And can you talk a little bit more also about dignity, because that is such a fundamental, part of what we all need in life. Please talk me
Yeah.
through how you work through dignity and moving consumers through that. Yeah.
D- di- sure. Dignity is sometimes all that a person has left And if that is felt like it's taken away by not showing respect or by having judgmental views or oppressive opinions about them, that could really rock someone's dignity. And to preserve dignity in someone at their lowest point is also vital for providing a lifeline to knowing that they can have that still about them without being too confronted by a situation. And I'll explain a little bit about how dignity at a forensic setting works. Is at the moment of admission, you do go through a strip search, and that could be very undignifying to go through. And to know that if you don't know the system, if someone does and is helping you understand that it's just a process, not for any form of embarrassment or loss of dignity, it may help the situation a lot easier, become a lot easier.
Yeah, it's so important. Yeah, knowing the system and enabling everyone to get the support that they need so that there is equity. Gosh, every time I talk with peer workers, I'm blown away by just how important and how powerful your work is. So thank you for sharing, Andrew. Linda, can we bring you in now? Can you hear me properly? All good, Linda.
Yep, I can.
Ah, that's good. It's always much better when online we can hear one another. It makes life a lot easier. Linda, can you tell us about human
Hello.
rights? Now, yeah, tell us about human rights and how that fits into your work. Yeah?
Well, it fits in quite well. It dovetails into what we do, because being person-centered, it is about respect, dignity, and upholding those, because it's so close and dear to the people. I know you can't give respect without receiving it. Like with the nursing staff have to give people the respect as well, and it comes back.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about respect, and I think also empathy was, one of the words that you chose for your introduction. And Andrew was speaking a lot about empathy. Can you talk through a little bit more, Linda, about your perspectives on empathy and how that relates to work and in upholding rights?
Well, when we sit down, because I work in an inpatient unit, and when I sit down with the patients and we just talk generally about anything and everything, it's just giving people the chance to vent, the chance to say what they want to say, and there's no judgment. And I think that's where the empathy comes in, because you're real. You're not there. You haven't got your own agenda, and I think that's really important.
Lovely. That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Ben, can we bring you in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, human rights, like when I think about human rights, I think we have them purely because we are human. Look, every single person has that, like, irrespective of who they are, what their background is, how they orientate. Like, every person, regardless if you're the nicest person in the world or what someone might think is the worst person in the world, like, you still reserve those rights. That's what we have. Like, they're innate things, they're legal things. But for me, in terms of peer work, like, I think peer work's an essential part, and I've said this in my introduction, is that co-design for peer workers. It's about integrating people, not just back into the community. Like, when we say we work in a mental health setting or a community mental health team, our number one goal, as they say, it's symptom resolution, it's recovery, it's reintegrating people into the community. But what about when we reintegrate them into community, we bring them back into the service to then improve that service next time? I mean, there's no other way you can really improve something bar than feedback. You follow feedback and you grow from that. So I think like most of us peer workers have had voluntary or involuntary treatments, admissions, medication, whether it's voluntarily or forced. When I think about we think about the services we provide, like it's really important that we do it in a very culturally appropriate way, but like Linda said, person-centered, because these people are vulnerable. Some of these times might be the most vulnerable times of their life. And in order to do that, I think peer workers bring that perspective, that vulnerability, like we're still vulnerable in a workplace and in a team, but we sort of teach other colleagues, staff and service, it's a cultural change. I think that'd be my response to all these questions would be, it's the cultural change that we all bring, not just in people, but in the service itself.
Yeah, wow, this is so powerful. I'd like to stay on this question a little bit longer, if we might, because all of you are using such powerful words, respect, dignity, convergence, empathy, integration, vulnerability. This is really, I think, striking at the core of what you do. Would you be willing to share kind of what you may have learned from involuntary treatments that's helping you kind of take a rights-based approach in your work?
I don't know. I mean, I'll go jump in quickly for another second in terms of when we look at involuntary and voluntary treatment. We've all got different variants of what that is, how intense or how many interactions we've had with that. But I think it's just that, like, what you experienced, would you want another person to experience it? The easiest reflection you can do is, if I've gone through this, well, I want my daughter, my brother, my partner, my family member or friend to go through that. It's a simple thing, like when I challenge people, and I do challenge people in the workplace, I say quite literally, like, the way you're discussing right now, the way you're treating someone or handling this service, would you want your family member to have experienced that? That's a very direct sort of statement to that. But I think from involuntary and voluntary treatment, I think, it's that adversity. You go through a lot of things, you grow stronger from it, and it would be really crap if you went through all those things and didn't gain something from it. Why not get paid, help other people, and grow even more?
Yeah, well said, Ben. Well said. And I think for us, especially with these webinars, we're looking at really moving towards the positive, and it's the Pareto principle. 80% of the time on the problem, and sorry, 20% of the time on the problem, and 80% on what can we do about it. So really looking forward to moving this forward in terms of what needs to change in the system. And Ben, if we can maybe stay with you on this one. What do you think needs to change in the system for you to be able to advocate and uphold human rights more effectively for the people you support? So this is about systemic change. What needs to change? And also, I'd also encourage the audience to pop their questions also into the live chat as well. So let's look at what needs to change. Do you want to kick us off, Ben?
Yeah, I won't try and answer too much about it. I did write something down because it's a pretty sort of intense thing that I'm very passionate about. Is I've only been a peer worker for 3 years. It's a small time in the scope of things. I've always been an advocate. I think that's the way I look at it. I've only been professionally paid or worked in a professional role for 3 years, but I think since the age of 15, I've pretty well been an advocate continuously. I've always been, I've said this in multiple, it's in my job interview with my friends, I've always been the one that's sat and talked about things regardless of what happened. I recently did a podcast with a young fella for his uni degree. The question was similar, like, what needs to change? Well, for me, not much has changed, but I'm doing what I did in my personal life now professionally. But my personal belief is that we start to reintegrate these people, like myself and others, into the service to actually verse that recovery is not just a linear process. That's the major thing that needs to change, is that we don't look at brief interventions in an acute mental health team. We don't look at just linear things. We don't look at a start and a finish point. I think we look at things about, okay, what about pre and post? What about ongoing interventions? I think the human approach of peer work and peer support is both positive and negative when we look at formalising it. I think, like I said previously, we can all be advocates, but the space that we're in peer work is, what about consumers and people that access services? Why don't they come work for us? Why aren't they put in larger consultancy roles? With some of the work that Bean's doing, I think that's fantastic. It's a prime example of, in the government role I work in, how that could happen. That's, really powerful.
Well, yeah, very powerful. Andrew, can we bring you in on this one? What needs to change in the system, for you to be able to take a more effective human rights approach?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Ben that a linear approach is not the correct way to be looking at it. It should be more of a sphere. In terms of supporting the consumer and upholding their rights, again, within that environment, the resources that we have available to us as peer workers are each other. And that is usually how we would be able to focus on being recovery oriented for the individual, for the consumer. And it's good to be complementary to other models involved in a person's care, but sometimes that is impacted and doesn't have the full effect or the intentions that are good coming through for the consumer. It impacts them because if there is a bit of conflict between the models, recovery, medical, then it may seem that that linear approach then is taking effect. And by that, I mean, it generally would follow the medical process and the medical model in terms of recovery and care. But I think a more human approach and a more inline approach with a complete spherical view of a situation rather than just a directive being the majority holder in someone's care.
Yeah, well said, Andrew. So you raised some really good points, and we'll come back to them. Linda, can I bring you in here, please? Yeah. What would you like to see change in the system?
You sure can. I think we have to start with the systems change. I know that's easier said than done, and I think that's why I continue to work and am so passionate, because although things have come a fair way in the time I've worked, it needs to go a lot further.
What would you like to see, Linda? What does good look like for you in that? What would you like to see go further?
I'd like to see people have a better opportunity to choose what they would like, what they want in their own lives, and not, I mean, because the medical model doesn't work. In some respects, it had its time. It worked, semi-okay, but we've learned that we have to go further. We have to look into, more person-centered care, more trauma-informed care. There are so many different things that we need to look into to make it better for others.
Yeah, you got great points. And I think you're all talking about this ongoing non-linear process. A lot of talk about the medical model versus the human model, and talking about the things that need to change. And I think you mentioned for consumers to be able to choose what they want and be more person-centered, more trauma-informed. Can we just let's chat a little bit more about kind of putting those out there, the things that we would really like to see in terms of kind of an ongoing model. And please jump in here, Ben or Linda or Andrew. Tell me more about the things that we would, if you could just redesign that whole system. Yeah, what would you design it as? What does good look like in terms of helping consumers choose what they want? Ben, come on, and I'll throw this one to you. You've got the power to redesign the whole system. Come on, what would you do?
I think what Linda said sort of really sparked something for me. That we do deliver a training program in New South Wales Health. It's all about recovery. It's therapeutic awareness. But the simplest way I could put it is that we look at things from, can we live with symptoms? I am a paid professional employee. I use my lived experience combined with professional experiences, but the thing is I live with symptoms. So unfortunately, the care that we provide, and this is a bit crucial of services, but I think if things were to change, we look at all people actually can live healthy lives with symptoms. People can be paid employees with symptoms. So we think about the medical model, like Linda said, it has its time. It treats for certain things, it accounts for certain things, but it's not the be all end all. With the medical model, we look at a symptom. How do we resolve that? We look at the academic part of nursing or therapy or medicine. It's, here's a symptom, here's a broken leg. Okay, let's split that leg and fix it. But if it's a broken brain, why are we then treating people, sedating people, involuntary treating people? Why is the broken leg not treated the same as a broken brain, and it has its own set of things? Why are professionals not trained in a more versed manner to mental health, being that it is such a serious matter in society these days? That's more of an ethical sort of thing. But I think people can live, what I'm trying to say is people can live healthy, meaningful lives with symptoms, as opposed to trying to resolve. And those, previously I used to try and cure my life and everything. I just wanted to be all in, and I decided to manage and live with, and now I live a meaningful life.
Yeah, and I think this is the beauty of these conversations, Ben. And as you said, that thought was sparked by something that Linda and Andrew had said, which is the beauty of these conversations. Linda, Andrew, is there anything that kind of sparks from Ben's conversations that you'd like to add to that?
Well, easing the impact of trauma, of knowing that having a mental illness itself can be the most traumatic thing anyone can ever experience. Now, understanding that from a non-lived experience perspective is something like a football player telling a tennis player how to play tennis. So it has the right consistency, that it's about sport, but they're two different fields and they're two very different things. So having people with lived experience functional and at their best is also benefiting the workforce, not just by the people power, but by the experiences they bring and understanding that comes with it. So yeah, I agree 100% with Ben and Linda in what they're saying as well.
And I love your analogy of the football player and the tennis player. It's such a beautiful way to put forward, which I think actually is ancient wisdom. I think that comes from Aristotle. I think way back when, however many thousands of years ago he lived, he said, only listen to the people that kind of know stuff that can really help you, or are well informed or have lived through that experience. So I think I'll remember that for a long while. Yeah, well said, well said. Linda, I can see you nodding. Do you want to add something to that?
I just totally agree with what Andrew said. That is so right. Yeah. You know, and that's where being a peer worker is such a fantastic thing, is because we do understand where people are coming from. We've been there, we've lived that. And it's something that we share. That's why I think we share a different sense. It's like an extra sense. And that's when I can be myself, is around other people with mental health issues, because we're all on the same level playing field. No one's better than anyone else. We're all there and we're all fighting our own fights, you know, and to be able to share even a small part of people's journeys with them is an honour. It really is. And that's the one thing that I can give. And it's not about money or anything like that.
Mm.
It's about trying to help other people.
Yeah. Beautifully said, Linda. Beautifully said. I mean, you make such a wonderful point, and you've stayed with the sporting analogy, level playing field. So we'll keep bringing sport back into this one.
Yep.
Now, all of you have sparked some questions from our delegates. I think they're really enjoying what you're saying. So let me jump to a couple from the delegates. Has the panel got any ideas around how we can improve social connectedness for support seekers through engagement with services? And that's a question from Luke. So I'll throw that out, please. Just any one of you want to grab that question?
If one of you guys want to shoot first, or I'll lead the charge, I don't mind. I think what Luke said sort of touches on, he's probably gave an answer and a question at the same time when we think about how do we change things and improve services. Well, the first thing is, how do we improve the social connectedness? How do we improve the engagement? Whether we look at engagement as just engaging with the service, engagement can be, all right, well, this person did fail to attend. That's engagement. Or is engagement actually a human approach? Is engagement, well, how about a community mental health team goes and involves themselves in the community? They go and host a barbecue, okay? They actually go and out into the community. They actually link with services. I think taking the case manager and the clinician role out a little bit and actually adding more of a walking alongside, because for me, a really simple statement for this, it's not so much about social connection, is if you're not slightly uncomfortable when you're advocating, you're probably not strongly advocating. I think with social connectedness, that's going to be on a community level. All right. If your community, I had this written down on another page actually previously, was if you're in a community that has a lot of stigma and doesn't have a lot of knowledge of mental health, there's not going to be much social connectedness. We look at some people that might get jobs in rural communities, and I grew up in a rural community. We go to a rural community. Unfortunately, your family and friends might not even have a belief or any empathy towards it. But yeah, I think social connectedness is we break it down to a community and a human level instead of, just I treat you, you're my client, you're my consumer, or you consume my service. I think it's that, we actually human level. Like if you walk down the street, we understand there's privacy, but if I were to see someone that's a consumer or client down the street, I'd say hello, whereas a person in a clinical role may walk straight past them or cross the road. For me, that's not human. That's a personal belief, but
Thanks for jumping in, Ben, and leading the charge. This is great. I'm learning so much. This is so good. Next question, and again, we can throw to any of you. How can services focus more on individual recovery, and how can we lead services to be more informed of the impacts of trauma? Who'd like to grab that one?
I'll go, Omer.
Andrew? Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
I think by identifying all aspects of what makes up an individual and how they came about needing help, I think then a recovery-oriented practice can be individualized and not categorized. Treating individuals as unique is also a big part of it as well, and their personal situations too. And you can acknowledge the trauma because the experience is real, and you can acknowledge it by validation and it not being dismissed or deconstructed to align with a diagnosis. There are many forms that make up a person, not just what one person is diagnosed with. So yeah, the contributing factors are a big way on how services can look at not just one particular part of someone's experience as why they're involuntary or needing assistance. Having a look at every side of what is contributing to why that person is needing help or experiencing distress.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Ben, Linda, do you want to? I can see Linda. I can see you both nodding. Do you want to jump in on that one?
After you, Linda.
I go right ahead, Ben, but I just totally agree with what Andrew says. That is brilliant. Yeah. Okay, Ben.
I suppose Andy's really touched on that. I think regardless of how we look at it and what we're doing, we look at like in the involvement, we look at human rights as a whole. It's just the individual. The individual needs to leave their care. Like, regardless, irrespective of what question you're asking, whether it's these guys in the comments or what's on the panel, that it's always about an individual. Like, person-centered care is a term that gets thrown around. I suppose us for peer workers and lived experience staff, we really know what it means to be person-centered or to be not experiencing person-centered care. I think I've accessed the service I now work at previously in my recovery journey. So I work in the same office that I used to come to. I sit in the same consultant rooms that I used to come to. I work with the staff that used to see me at some of the most vulnerable times. And to start with, that was really painful and difficult. But now it's the transformative thing. It's like evidence. Some people need to see evidence. They need to see someone doing well before they believe it can happen. But I think what Andy said in terms of describing and what it is, I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
Cool. Beautiful. Great conversation. You don't get much better than brilliant and fantastic. So I love the way this conversation is moving. We've got a question from Linda Walton, and she asks, we are functioning in the community. We'll still have trauma of the past. What can and will do to help people in the community, such as police and health workers, consider trauma and not cause more? Wow. You're all so polite. I love you guys. You really are. You're all so polite. You're waiting for each other. All right, come on, Linda. I can see you smiling on this one. You grab this one.
Okay. Yeah. I know, because because I've lost someone who I knew through this, so I really feel this. To me, people need more education, and especially police officers. Like covering mental health in 4 hours or whatever of their training is not enough. There are mental health first aid. There are so many different programs that people can do and get involved in that actually mean something. Not just tick a box and, oh yeah, you done the 4 hours. 4 hours is not enough. And people need to be educated in mental health. I mean, I know like a lot of our workers are generalist nurses. They're not mental health specifically trained. So to me, education is the answer.
Education. Yeah, well said, Linda. It's so important, isn't it? Yeah. Now, this conversation is like sparking a lot of questions and interest. And do you want to turn to actually what suggestions you might have for other people who are wanting to become advocates in either systemic or individual advocacy? So, how can people follow in your footsteps? Please, maybe let's stay with you, Linda. What suggestions would you have for people wanting to follow in the line of work that you do?
Do the mental health Cert 4 through TAFE, MHCC. There are so many different places where you can actually do the Cert 4, because we always need more peer workers. I mean, some of us are getting old, and so I'm just trying to look out for what happens in the long term. And it's about, finding young blood or even people in their 40s, and getting them involved. To me, it doesn't matter what age. You can always become a mental health peer worker.
Well said. And I think the point about being young at heart is well taken, Linda. And I can still feel that passion in you. I can still feel that youth and that energy in you. In fact, in all of you. So that's quite lovely. Yeah. Andrew, let's come to you, buddy. Yeah, what suggestions would you have for people wanting to become advocates in systemic or individual advocacy?
Sure. If any, would be for people wanting to advocate in systemic or individual advocacy, is to remember that everyone has a voice that has a meaning and purpose, whether it can be heard or not. But knowing and respecting that every voice has come from lived experience, and as a collective group, your voice can help many people reach the volume that they need to be heard. Um, you also have the backing of a very unique and resilient workforce in peer workers who help each other solidify human rights for everyone. And that's a very important part of knowing what the reasons you're doing peer work or wanting to do systemic or individual advocacy is for the right reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Goes back to intentions. Absolutely, Andrew. Yeah, well said. Ben, do you wanna pop in with a couple of questions? Not questions, with a couple of suggestions you have for others.
Yeah,
You can give
probably.
them questions if one, that's all good.
Yeah, I sort of went off script. I think we can probably have a laugh, a little less formal about what I wrote. I wrote do it, peer work empowerment, 3 key words. But no, I agree. Ground up, like grassroots sort of thing. Start in your own friend group, start in your own family. Like, be comfortable. Like, if you're not already doing it, or if you already are doing it, if you're having an interest and you're probably wanting to get into it, you probably find you're already doing it in some extent. Like I said, I just do what I've always done, just in a job now for me. So, but in terms of how you actually get there, I just looked up mental health jobs, went on Seek and did your categories in terms of actually getting the job. Kept looking, applied for a job. I didn't actually know what it was. I thought it was like to be quite layman's terms, quite simple, I thought it was like a disability support job, And I came in and found out what it was and was like, holy crap, I've never actually thought that existed. And day by day it got different, but just find it. Like, it meant there's consumer jobs, advocacy jobs, peer jobs, lived experience. There's so many different names, but definitely what these guys said, and that Cert 4 peer work, you'll either do it before, during, or after. Like, it'll be done. So you can do that before MHCC, being lived experience Australia. There's so many options.
Yeah, and I think great points. And I think your comment also comes back to ancient wisdom as well, which is do it, which is such a fundamental in life. It sounds simple, but it's probably the greatest thing that we can all do, whatever we want to achieve. So I'm loving that there's some really core ancient practical wisdoms coming through on this. So absolutely, Ben. And I think chatting with all 3 of you, I think you're all doers, which is wonderful. You've sparked another question. Michael Bales asks, the intrinsic value of every person should be at the heart of human rights. Any comments on that from the panel?
I agree.
That's a tough one.
Beautiful.
Anyone else can go, or I'll go. I'm easy. It's probably open to interpretation. That's the way I'd say it. But I mean, for me, I think this is how I interpret this in terms of the wording. It could be wrong, so sorry, Michael, if it is, but I think the intrinsic value of each person should be at the heart of human rights. It's that person-centered thing again, the intrinsic value. Each human life is worth each human life. Each individual person is worth each individual person. We might be a collective, but not on a spiritual level. When you look at human rights, it's each individual human, okay? There's no one thing that will actually treat another person. There's not one be all end all. I think at the heart of human rights, when we look at intrinsically, we look into that person. Okay, this is probably a bit far out there, but I think each person should have 100% of that effort. Each person should be treated as an individual when we provide the care, or related back to that police question and some of those sort of similar things and that trauma that exists. I think we look at that individually, look at that person and who they are. We don't operate from their trauma. We don't operate on their symptoms. It's that human rights approach. It's we look at the person, you know. It's nothing about me without me. So I don't know if that's how Michael thoughts. That's my comments at least.
Yeah, lovely. I enjoyed Andrew's smile. I agree, and I enjoyed your, digging deep into that one. Really cool. Linda, do you want to chime in on that as well?
Oh no, the men put it really, really well.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? It's all good, as you have done too. Okay, couple more questions coming. This is I can't keep up with all the questions. Here's one. Maybe we'll go to Ben on this one because this popped up whilst you were chatting, but it could be to all of you. I'm not sure. When you started as a peer worker, did you realise the impact you could have on human rights?
Oh, sugar. No, like I said, I started walking in the door thinking I would be a run-of-the-mill disability support worker. Would just be working with people that had probably, for me as a young man in a rural community, I thought, I'll be working with someone that had a physical disability or an incapacity to work, and I'd support them in a mental health space. So I came in and it was completely shattered. I work in an acute mental health team. I go to an inpatient unit, an emergency department. I work with other services, and unreal. Like, I never would have thought the impact I've had. Like, I now work with families and carers in relation to some of the things that everyone else has said. Like, I've got a job now in an initiative that started like in suicide prevention. I never did think I'd have an impact, but I sure as heck have, and I'm proud of it. In 3 years, it's grown. I own that now. Definitely, 100% have an impact, and not just on someone else, on myself.
Yeah, brilliant. Well said. We've got more questions coming in, so if we've conscious of time, we've got 8 minutes. If there are any more questions from delegates, please pop them in. We have one from Rob Foster, and Rob says, with regards to peer workers in mental health units, why does this not apply to all mental health units, that a peer worker is available? Linda, do you want to grab this one?
Well, I mean, I'm the only peer worker that works in the inpatient unit here, and I know that it is difficult. A lot of services don't have peer workers employed, and we need to open that up more. We need to make peer workers available for inpatient units. So yeah, I totally agree with Rob that we need to put more money and effort into it.
Okay, that's cool. Well said. We're just looking at the take from the questions. That could possibly have been Nicola's question, but that's all good. But if it was Nicola's, I apologise. We have another one. We have another question here. I think this one's from Rob. It says the clinical is taken out of mental health units when we are able to speak to peer workers. Do you think that nurses need to be trained in peer work as well? Andrew, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Rob. I think the clinical remains in peer work in terms of, depending on if you're on a unit where you do have to document clinically what is expected of you. Do I think nurses should be trained in peer work? Look, there is that ideal world that everyone would understand what lived experience is and how to approach it and how to handle a situation with someone experiencing distress. I think as people, we all have a certain amount of lived experience. Whether nurses need to be trained as peer workers, in some elements, I would agree with that. I think yes, there would be some very knowledgeable areas to pick up on, and vice versa. I think that there's a lot that a peer worker can take from being immersed in the clinics where there are nurses and seeing how they operate as well. But overall, I'd say I'm 50-50 on that one, Rob.
Right. Well, thanks for that. I want to come to each of you, and this is probably more acknowledging our current situation. We're just kind of out of lockdown with COVID. Just want to very quickly, do each of you want to just share how much harder COVID has made your work or how it's impacted the way that you're able to advocate as a peer worker. Ben, do you want to give us just a quick thought on COVID and how it's impacted your work this year? Well, 2 years actually, isn't it? It's been 2 years since we've been going through this.
I think my situation's a little bit different, and I spoke to some of these guys previously about this, but my role adapted as a peer worker actually ended up in quite a clinical setting. Unfortunately, that was just due to a lot of politics and logistics of COVID. I worked in a vaccination clinic, obviously not vaccinating, but just administration and non-clinical logistics. But I ended up still finding myself having a lot of conversations with people from a mental health perspective. So I was there administrating things. But I'd actually find myself talking to people that were anxious. We were in rural towns, really remote towns, talking to a lot of farmers and cockies and really rural people, really stoic sort of agrarian people. And it was just changing my role really into that. But on a general level, yeah, peer work as a whole has changed. Mental health's changed, It's all virtual, phone, VC like this. Yeah, it's entirely changed. I don't know about the other guys. And for anyone that doesn't know, agrarians, someone that's from an agricultural background, their life and finances rely on farming, and a cocky is a farmer. It's a very rural, remote term for what a farmer is.
Cool. Thanks
a cowboy, perhaps.
Cowboy. Cool. Okay. Linda, what are your thoughts? How's COVID impacted the work you do?
It changes on a daily basis at the moment, because although Sydney and New South Wales is out of lockdown, we're starting to see cases here which we hadn't before. So yeah, it just seems really bizarre that New South Wales is okay, but now our area is getting hit.
Yeah.
So that makes it really difficult. So yeah, we do a lot of team meetings, Skype, whatever we can.
Yeah.
But I'm still allowed to go in and see the patients every day in the unit.
Yeah.
So that's one good thing. Yep.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I mean, I can't imagine how difficult your work has, how additionally difficult your work has become because of COVID. And you've got Andrew here, who's in his car. Talk about passionate. Last word, my friend. We've probably got just a couple of moments before we wrap. Any thoughts on how COVID has impacted?
Yeah, I definitely bring a different perspective to the table, in terms of that you and I and the rest of New South Wales have experienced COVID and the impacts of it, whereas the guys and girls that I work for, the consumers that I care for, that have not seen the outside world for quite a considerable amount of time, have not known what the impacts of COVID are, and they constantly ask and try and find out more about what it's like. So I find that a difficult conversation to have at times with them, because it's hard to explain what they're experiencing as everyday life.
Yeah, well said. Well, look, I think, you've all done such great work. You've done a brilliant job today as well. So I just want to thank you for your time on this panel and for the wonderful conversations you've had. I mean, I don't know, delegates, if you want to put in a thank you to Ben, Linda, Andrew for their time, or a smiley face. I mean, I would be just gushing with thanks for the insights you've shared. So look, I want to say thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the panel. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I also want to thank all of the wonderful delegates that are in cyberspace somewhere. And also to Being for creating this amazing series. The recording will be available shortly, and I can't believe we're almost finished. The final webinar in this series for Mental Health Month is next Thursday on the 27th at 11, where we'll be looking at reclaiming our rights through consumer advocacy. So tune in then. But before you go, we have one final call to action, and that is one of hope. We hope that we as consumers can advocate for and influence systemic change. We ask that the government sit up and act on what consumers have to say. We ask decision makers to listen to the insights of our speakers and panelists on how we can improve our systems and our infrastructure to support the human rights of people who live with mental health issues. Thank Thank you all. Thank you, Being. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next week. All right. Take care. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.